Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Hosted PBX 5 Things You Need to Know Before You Buy webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Thursday, May 29, 2014. I would now like to turn the conference over to Steve Lingo, Senior Marketing Manager at XO Communications. Please go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Hope. Hi, everybody. The world's changing fast, and the IT and telephony worlds are changing faster still. I don't think that's probably a news flash to anybody here, especially if you're in the IT business. You know, there's a lot of things going on: mobility and BYOD, social media, cloud advances, a lot of things. In respect to BYOD in particular, Gartner says that the rise of BYOD programs is the single most radical shift in economics of client computing for businesses since PCs invaded the workspace. That's a huge statement, but it shows the magnitude of the things that are happening with the proliferation of mobility services and mobility devices. Weather and storms and other things are really driving home the effect of business continuity issues. According to FEMA, 1 in 4 businesses never reopen their doors after a disaster. That's quite a staggering statistic, and those of you on the East Coast here, are familiar with the Snowmageddon and Hurricane Sandy. But no matter where you are, there's floods, tornadoes, there's basic business outages that could strike everybody. So there's just a lot of things happening that really are driving a lot of things, making IT people sweat. Hosted and cloud services are really taking off, which is probably why you're here. Gartner forecasts that 60% of enterprises will provide their users with hosted voice services by next year. That's quite staggering in and of itself. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts that you, if you're an IT manager, got to keep track of. But on top of that, the number of technologies being developed to address these things is increasing exponentially, while your available staff and IT budget is relatively stagnant, creating what is called a complexity chasm. In fact, according to IDC, the average enterprise will need to manage 50 times more information by 2020, while increasing IT staff by only 1.5%. That's quite a delta, and those of you on this phone who are responsible for managing your IT need to start thinking, how are you going to address this? All right, well, this is where Hosted PBX can help. You probably know that, and that's probably why you're here. You're already thinking about how Hosted PBX might help your business. Heck, you might even already be evaluating vendors. In fact, let's take a quick show of hands. Where along the Hosted PBX buying cycle are you? You can see some selections there. Are you not even starting? Are you just here? Maybe you've been tasked with figuring out what to do, and maybe Hosted PBX is one of your options. Maybe you've decided on Hosted PBX, but you aren't really evaluating vendors yet. You haven't made any movement. Maybe you already have an RFP out, or you're starting to whittle down and look at a number of vendors. You're further along the trail. Perhaps you've already chosen a vendor, or you think you have a vendor lined up, but you haven't started the implementation process yet. Or perhaps you're already using Hosted PBX, and for one reason or another, it's not meeting your needs as it's currently configured, or you're looking to see what other tricks you might be able to use. I can see that a lot more than half of you are just starting out and haven't had a clue. So this is really good. I think we'll be able to help you here. Probably, it looks like we've got almost 70% of the people are in the front end with, between just starting out maybe you're deciding and interviewing vendors. So that's good. And I see there are a number of people here who are already using Hosted PBX. So I'll be interested when we get to the Q&A at the end, hearing what your thoughts are and what your questions are, having been through this now, and as already existing Hosted PBX users. So the 5 things we wanted to talk about today are, the key 5 things that we've learned talking with customers, and what they really need to know, and that differentiates vendors across the patch. Just because everybody sells Hosted PBX doesn't make them all the same. You look under the covers, you look under the hood, you look below the dirt, as these rabbits are, and you're going to see quite a different story. Okay, so no matter where you are in the buying cycle, even if you already have Hosted PBX, it's possible that there are some better options out there, and we're going to look at some of these now. All right, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Over to you.
I'm great. Thanks. And this is Steve Jacklich, Product Sales Specialist here for Hosted PBX. And when you're looking at Hosted PBX, there's really 3 main components that every solution has. So every solution that you're looking at, these are the 3 components. I mean, first being that the phone system that's sitting up in the EXO, or sitting up in the cloud, in the network, everybody has that component to the solution. And then the network access, the connectivity that gets you from your premise locations to the phone system. So how do you access the phone system is very important. And then the last piece is really the dial tone and the phone numbers associated to your telephones. How do you communicate to and from the PSTN? So what you want to look for with organizations out there is, how many of these companies that you're looking at do all 3 of these components to the solution? Do you want one solution for Hosted PBX, or a combination of different solutions from different vendors to accomplish the one solution that is Hosted PBX? So these are very important things to look at, and like I said, every hosted solution has these 3 components, and now we want to dig into kind of, what are these components and what are the differences between them?
Exactly. So, with respect to access, which is the first thing on our list, to ensure you'll get a reliable, secure service with high-def voice quality, you really need private access. We're going to go on about this a little bit. You'll hear it pop up repeatedly throughout the day. A shared service that rides the public internet or requires other suppliers for connectivity is going to create trouble for you. Without private access, even Batman, might have trouble protecting your network and corporate data. All right. Also, private network access gives you a single point of contact for troubleshooting and a single SLA. So you'll hear us touch on those more throughout the day, but private access is going to be key.
So digging into the access considerations, and obviously our recommendation is always to run these types of solutions over private connectivity. So looking at MPLS technology, or at a minimum private line connectivity from your locations to the network. And when you do that, when you're looking at these types of solutions, now you're taking, your legacy connections for internet and your legacy connections to maybe your phone system today, a PRI or the trunking. Now you're looking at one connection for your VoIP that's going to dynamically allocate the bandwidth between VoIP and all your other data traffic, and having a connection that's able to do that, right? Have private traffic over it as well as public traffic, and then with that private connectivity with, let's say, MPLS, you can have classes of service to prioritize the traffic. I mean, the biggest thing with VoIP is prioritization. Any public internet connections, there is no possible way to prioritize the traffic. Have real time for your voice, and then have prioritization for all your other traffic. So levels of prioritization, and then having remote users and how they get into the network from a security perspective is really things to consider when you're talking about the network access. And it may be different for all your locations, but you really want to look at your core locations that have multiple handsets out there, with some type of private connectivity, and MPLS is probably the best recommendation for that.
Second on our list of 5 is network capabilities. This is a big one. In fact, there are a number of things involving the network that you'll really want to take note on here. We're going to walk through some of the most important ones now.
Yeah, I mean, class of service we've talked about, but now looking at your LAN, there's really 2 things we're talking about: the WAN connectivity, and we talked about doing private connectivity from your location to the network. So that is the WAN side of the network. And now looking at the LAN side, really, it's equally as important as the WAN side. So now from a LAN perspective, you got to understand how your traffic flows at your location. And when you're looking at a VoIP solution, really what starts to be the most important thing is the infrastructure, right? So the actual physical cabling you have between your desktops. Do you have multiple Cat5 or better drops to each workstation? Because there's 2 ways to connect an IP endpoint. So if you've got multiple cables to the desktop and you have one cable going to the phone, one going to the PC, that's the ideal configuration. Then you don't have to worry about prioritization on the LAN. But most of our customers have one usable cable for a VoIP solution. That cable is going to go in to the phone and then to the PC, because every IP phone's got a 2-port switch on it. Now what becomes the most important thing in the LAN prioritization is this switch that these phones are registering to. So you have to have a managed power over Ethernet switch, because now you've got to prioritize the traffic on your LAN infrastructure. So I don't have all of this browsing and maybe I'm streaming video, streaming audio. If I don't prioritize that traffic on that data switch, you're going to have degraded voice. So both components are equally as important as the WAN side and the LAN side. So just so we understand that this type of prioritization is needed on both sides of the network, the LAN and the WAN. Now, when you're looking at these types of solutions too, you'll want to understand what that provider has as far as redundancy that they've built into the network. Do they have core switches in the network that are fully redundant? Are they managing those things? Are they proactively monitoring routers and so on? And what do they have from a pre-sale network testing and so on? So are they able to come out and test your VoIP readiness? So these are a lot of things that you'll want to think about when you're looking at these solutions. What is the vendor going to do for you? Make sure that when you install this new solution that everything works the way it should, or the way it was presented. And these solutions, most of these solutions today are operating expense solutions. So today you may have a phone system that you purchased, that you own. You're spending capital on the maintenance and so on every month. Now these types of solutions are virtually all OpEx. You've got network connectivity that's always an operating expense, and now you've got really seat costs or platform costs that are hosted PBX solutions that are all operating expense. And there are some differences out there with carriers too. Some of the carriers are going to charge you for the phone, so it's kind of a combination of OpEx and CapEx. So you really want to look at the difference in those solutions, because if you're looking for one solution that is all operating expense, you really have to understand that with the vendors that you're looking at and what you're actually paying for. Does that seat cost that you're getting for hosted PBX, does that include the physical IP phone, or is that something I have to buy extra? And also, when you're looking at these types of solutions, what's important is how do I manage this solution? What do I have? What are the tools that I have to manage these types of solutions? So what's important is everybody's got web-based portals. How intuitive are they? Make sure you look at the web-based portals before you buy and understand how you can administer the system, from an end user perspective and also from an administrative perspective. So, do I have a web-based tool that my users can use to control their routing on their extension, make changes to their voicemail and so on. So, and then from an admin perspective, how much control do I have over my phone numbers? If I've got business continuity capabilities and so on, do I control the routing on my extension? So am I able to repoint my numbers in real time or set up alternate routes ahead of time? So what type of access do I have to the platform? And that's real important when you're, so I'd ask for a demonstration of the portals. I'd ask for, the demonstration on the end user. What does the end user experience look like? So these are very important things when you're looking at hosted solutions.
Exactly. So, as you can see here, we all know there's a lot of evil doers out there. Anyone here remember Heartbleed? Oh, right. Yeah, that just happened. This stuff happens all the time. So if you think carefully, really, if you want to trust your core business communications to the World Wide Web. This gets back to the earlier conversation of private access. But in addition to private access, you're going to be better off if security is important to you, if you also look for a vendor who's got a reliable Tier 1 network, not the World Wide Web running their hosted PBX for you.
And Steve, that's a great.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and Steve, sorry, that's a great point, and it reminds me of a real life scenario where, customer was running, VoIP applications over the public internet. They also had integration of some toolbars, and a lot of the services have toolbars to click to dial and so on like that. And one of my friends had this service, and they actually got hacked in the toolbar, and people were able to make calls from their toolbar from their desk. So they were actually making calls from their phone because they hacked into their toolbar, because all those things were going over the public internet. There was no secure connectivity on that application. So they essentially were using their phones to make calls to all over the world. So it's very something you really need to consider from a security perspective and how you do access that phone system. And also what's important, from network capabilities is, what is that provider or that carrier, what type of reach do they have? So from a local service perspective, how many locations can they access for you? What type of network reach do they have? How far can they expand? As you're adding locations, making sure that you can provide the same solution at all of your locations with one carrier, I think is important. And probably one of the most important things from a regulatory perspective in 911 is, how are they providing 911 to that physical IP phone? So are they doing it with a on-premise gateway or something and a traditional analog line, or are they providing you enhanced 911 service right to every IP phone, and not only IP phone, but an IP application? So, do I have 911 access from a soft phone? Those things are very important from a liability perspective, from a carrier perspective, as well as the customer. So, you've got to, if you give a soft phone to somebody and they're dialing 911, you've got to make sure that that's going to the location that emergency services potentially need to go to. So those are things to consider when you're talking to different providers out there. How do they provide 911 to a physical IP phone, and how do they provide it to a soft phone, if at all?
Good stuff. All right, so we've already covered two of our five. We did access and network capabilities. Now we're going to look into our third key item. You'll definitely want to include UC, Unified Communications, mobility, and BYOD, bring your own device. into any hosted PBX buying decision making. The rapid rise in mobile device usage is no surprise. I threw some stats at you earlier. In fact, some stats from the Pew Internet Project show that 91% of American adults now have a cell phone. And for the first time, the majority of Americans, almost 60%, now own a smartphone. But it's not just the mobile phones and tablets. Company BYOD programs are also including laptops and computers. Okay, Gartner predicted a couple of years ago that by this year, 2014, 80% of professionals will use 2 or more personal devices to access corporate systems or data. Now, I haven't personally seen the updated version of that report to verify whether it's actually coming in at 80% or not, but I personally access company data with 3 of my own personal devices. I've got an iPhone, an iPad, and I even sometimes use my own home desktop Mac to access corporate email, IM, calendar, SharePoint, all of those kinds of things. So I'm sure many of you are the same. So whether it's 80% or not, I bet that's close. But more importantly, worker productivity, is what's driving a lot of this too. Forrester reports that Forrester reports that worker productivity is the top benefit achieved from deploying BYOD, and over 80% saying that was their number one benefit. All right. So if your hosted PBX solution doesn't fully support and enable mobile workers and BYOD, you're going to fall behind competitors who are. All right, so let's just see where you are on the path to BYOD. This might be new for some of you. Maybe now is the first time you've heard of bring your own device. Maybe some of you are thinking about it. Maybe as a lot of companies do, they enable it for strategic or key employees. They might have executives or salespeople can do it. They also allow a lot of companies partition the services, so maybe everybody in their company can have BYOD, but only certain people have access to advanced applications. There's different ways you can roll that out for key employees. Or maybe you've fully rolled out a fully baked BYOD plan and you have that. So there's different ways along the path, and it is a path. For those of you who are rolling it out, you'll know that it's not like you start it and it's all of a sudden done. It's a migration path that's continually evolving. I see the vast majority of you, over half, are rolling it out for key employees. Some of you, not quite, about 16% have rolled it out fully, but the rest are thinking about it. And there's a few who are unsure what BYOD, bring your own device, is. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, we actually did a couple of webinars earlier this year. You could jump on XO.com or look at our XO YouTube channel. Just type in XO BYOD, and you can go through a couple of nice webinars there. They'll give you some details there. So it's looking good. I think we've got a mix of replies here, but no doubt to anybody that BYOD and mobility, remote workers, is really the trend. And to address this significant trend, a few hosted PBX vendors like us, have added mobile apps and soft phones that are fully integrated into their hosted PBX. Okay, so this literally puts your work phone and your smartphone and your computer all together. So your work phone will ring simultaneously on any registered device, whether it's your smartphone or your work laptop or whatever you're using. And more importantly, or what I guess is unique in that, is making an outbound call from those devices will show up on the receiver's phone as if it's from your phone number or your work number. So it does make your phone, your smartphone and your laptop look and behave exactly like your office phone. In fact, it's possible just to not have an office phone anymore and just use these. So you could implement hosted PBX and actually not even have to buy desk phones for your employees. You could just deploy the soft client and the mobile application on their smartphones and forego the entire cost and maintenance of managing and procuring or leasing the phones. So there's a lot of things you can do there. It's pretty interesting. Not everybody does that, but if you're looking at BYOD, you definitely want to look at a vendor who's going to make that as an option for you. Okay, but mobility and bring your own device are only the start. Hosted PBX can be and really should be the entree to your unified communication strategy. You know, moving your telephony control and management to the cloud opens an entire world of opportunity, making communication between employees and key customers and even suppliers far more efficient and easy. And easy and efficient communication translates directly into increased productivity and speed. If you're in a competitive market, I know we are, and you're looking for ways to be more efficient and productive, if you aren't looking for ways to be efficient and productive, your competitors are really going to eat you for lunch. So you need to be looking at ways to make your employees communicate easily between themselves and with others. Okay. So when shopping for a hosted PBX supplier, you know, one of the things you want to look for, dig under the hood, is to see how they can help you with your unified communication strategy. What can they do to help? What services and features do they have? Can they provide advice as to getting you from where you are now to where you want to be down the road?
And contact center is, you know, a very important thing for a lot of companies. And what you want to look at is does that hosted PBX solution, you know, integrate a contact center, you know, whether it's just a hunt group or a call queue, do you need real-time reporting or just historical? So there's a lot of things to look at from a contact center perspective, and all organizations have different types of requirements needed, but, you know, looking for a company that has an integrated solution with hosted PBX and not have to have a third party for the contact center solution, I think is very important. Now, talking about service level agreements, and this is very important, it kind of pulls back to, you know, how you access the network, and you know, and this kind of going full circle around, you know, why the recommendation is always to connect to the hosted PBX solution over private connectivity is so you can guarantee a level of service. You know, anytime you're going over the public internet, there's no way to guarantee any service level agreement for voice quality. So, you know, looking at providers that have guarantees around voice quality and uptime are what you need to look at with these types of solutions. You know, again, just not being able to guarantee any level of voice quality. You know, I don't know that anybody would want that type of solution that I don't get some type of guarantee around, you know, the quality of voice that I'm going to experience. Because when you're looking at hosted, I mean, really, you want to look to accelerate your voice. Now with high definition voice with VoIP solutions, you know, you're getting a higher grade of voice than you have with traditional dial tone, and now having an SLA around it, I think, is extremely important. And Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
No, just the big thing, Steve, was that, you know, linking this back to our very first slide on access. You know, you are not going to get an SLA from somebody who doesn't also provide the access for you. You will only get an SLA for them for what they provide. So if you want an end-to-end SLA, you need to speak with somebody who's going to connect you phone to phone, all the way down the pipe. And that's the only way to do it. And that comes with another benefit also, is when there is a problem, and you know, this is technology, there will be some problems along the way. When there is a little hiccup, you want to know that there's one phone number to call. You don't want to have to call one and they say, well, it's not ours, call the other guy, and you call that person, he says, well, my access circuit looks fine, it's got to be the other guy, maybe it's the phones. And you stand there and, you know, they're all pointing at each other, and you're sitting there with it not working. Whereas if you have one vendor who touches everything and manages everything end to end and has an SLA for everything end to end, you won't have multiple points of contact for troubleshooting. So that's a really big one, Steve, and thanks for bringing that one. All right, so that's it. You have the 5 things. You know, we talked about network access. We talked about network capabilities, mobility, unified communications, and you know, the growth of BYOD and what that can mean for your business. Steve touched on contact centers and how you might want to think about, if you're going down the hosted PBX path, you know, getting one that also is integrated or has built-in contact center capabilities, rather than farming that out to another vendor that doesn't operate or have interoperability with the service that you currently are running. And as we just touched on, SLAs. So that's a lot of stuff to remember. To help you out, what I've done here is I've boiled these down to a couple of slides. Everybody who's here on this call, when we're done here, we'll send you an email with this deck. And in this deck, you'll see there's 2 emails that have these things. It's just a little checklist I put together, kind of encapsulating the things Steve and I talked about here. So you can have that in front of you and not have to kind of page through the entire deck. All right, so when you're buying hosted PBX, let's recap one more time. You really want to drill down. You want to be those rabbits looking at the carrots, whatever your analogy is, but you want to ask a lot of questions. All right. You also want to ask how much they're going to help and support you before and after the sale. You know, how much will that vendor provide of that kind of support? And do they have a team of experienced, talented people who are going to stand behind you, you know, all the way along the path from phone to phone? Because with the right partner, you know, as these 2 guys are doing here, you know, you really can do more if you got the right team. All right. And a shameless plug for us here at XO, you know, we are really helping a lot of customers do more. We've got very small customers all the way up to very large customers, including 50% of the Fortune 500. So we've got a lot of hosted PBX experience, and really, I think can help a lot of customers regardless of your niche or where you are on your provisioning path. So with that, we're going to answer some of your questions. I saw some of them coming in here along the way. Before we do get to the questions, though, I did see some of them some of you were looking for some more information. If you want to, we do have some white papers. We have some tutorials and things on our website. You'll see the thing there, xo.com/unify. Some videos you think you'll find helpful that will help you walk through more about hosted PBX and BYOD if you want to learn. White papers. There's just a bunch of things there that will help you, I think, understand what it is, you know, wherever you are along your path. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie. Do we have any questions?
Yes, Steve, we do. And before we get started with the questions, I'd like to remind everyone that if you do have questions you have not yet entered into the chat, you can enter those in the chat in the bottom left corner of your screen, and we will get those questions in the queue. So I'd like to start off just by reiterating what Steve said. We do have a lot more information available. We did have one question about where someone could find information that's more of a high-level overview. I know we did get into quite a bit of detail today, but we realize that many of you are at various stages along your path with hosted PBX. And if you go to xo.com, we also do have a lot more high-level overview material, as well as, you know, a lot more detail as well, if that is what you are looking for. So now delving into some of these questions. We have a question from Andrew. He's asking, can calls come in and still be routed through a live receptionist? Steve Jacklich, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, calls can be routed in however you see fit. You can have an auto attendant front-ending the main calls, or you can have your calls come into a dedicated reception person and route that way. So no different than a premise-based phone system. You have the same capability from routing calls internally in multiple different ways. And what's important there is every customer is different in how they handle calls. So understanding that up front, and those are things we try to do from a discovery is find out how do your calls come into your organization and how are you processing calls. So yeah, absolutely can route calls directly to a receptionist or to an auto attendant or to a group of people. So it just really depends.
Hey, thanks. And another question here. Which IP phones do you support at XO?
Yeah, we support the full line of Polycom phones, the SoundPoint series, as well as the VBX series. We're actually, phasing out the SoundPoint series now that the VBX series is fully deployed. We do offer some Cisco SPA series phones as well with our solution. And what to note there is our phones are designed for a hosted platform. The firmware and software is designed specifically for the BroadSoft platform, and we run the latest version of BroadWorks release 15, so we're always current on the BroadWorks release. So. And in that, our phones are designed specifically for the firmware and the software to register to a hosted platform.
Okay, one more question coming in here from Sean. Is hosted PBX typically rolled out over private line or basic internet circuits?
Well, I'd say for the most part, I would say 95% of the companies out there are deploying these solutions over the public internet, and I think that is part of the problem. And with these solutions is by doing that, and if you were an early adopter, you definitely rolled this out over the public internet. And now, our recommendation, I think a lot of organizations is to register these services over some type of private connection. MPLS would be probably the most recommended mechanism to register IP phones, because then you can select different levels of prioritization on your voice or on your data traffic, and voice always being the #1 priority. The thing about VoIP traffic is it doesn't take up a lot of bandwidth, but bandwidth is not the problem. The problem is prioritization. If you don't prioritize that traffic over all your other browsing traffic, and really when you'd find a problem is, during March Madness when everybody's streaming video, that's really going to denigrate your voice if you're not prioritizing it. So it really doesn't, bandwidth doesn't have a big say in what happens with VoIP. So I think the dynamic is changing around hosted PBX solutions, and more companies are looking, and from our perspective, we mandate that it goes over a private MPLS connection. So I think that's going to be more of the norm, and the trend going forward is, to have a quality hosted PBX solution, it's got to go over a private connection.
Okay, we have a question here about how does this tie into managed services, or how does managed services tie into this?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, managed services. I mean, this is really a managed solution when you're looking at it, because now you've got your network connectivity, your phone system, your dial tone, all supported and supplied from one vendor ultimately, hopefully, and it is a managed solution from the router perspective, the telephone equipment, so the IP phones, potentially a power over Ethernet switch. A lot of providers will provide the switch or allow the customer to provide it. So, these solutions are really fully managed from a gear perspective. And then from an administrative perspective, I mean, either the provider can manage the administration, or really we're giving the keys to the customer to be able to manage from a very intuitive web interface. So they are managed solutions, because the provider is generally providing all of the hardware to support these types of solutions.
We have a question about whether call recording and conference bridges are available with a hosted solution, whether that's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them provide it, and we're no different. We actually provide call recording with our solution, either as an on-demand or all the time, as well as we've just instituted a full 148-port Meet Me conference bridge inherent to Hosted PBX that is all flat rated, so no usage charges for using the Meet Me conference audio bridge.
We have a question here about how is quality and performance measured, and who is it measured by?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, ultimately it's going to be measured by the customer. What kind of quality am I getting on my voice? But one thing that we do too that most don't, we're providing the router for the access circuit, and then between the router and the customer's LAN, we're also providing a BroadSoft Packet Smart device that's actually monitoring all of the voice packets for quality. So it's one thing that we do that a lot of carriers don't, in that so we can have a direct line into the traffic and how it's performing. So we are managing and monitoring that traffic. So our care organization has a direct line into any latency and jitter that may be happening on that on those calls. So it's just another step we take in guaranteeing the quality, because when you're providing an SLA, you need to have those components in place to be able to measure the quality that you're getting in the SLA around it.
We have some questions here from Dwayne about Hosted PBX for the hospitality industry, whether we have any systems in that industry, and if so, how do we interface with the PMS, call accounting, guest voicemail, and he's also asking about calls tracked through an ACD. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, the hospitality industry it's a very unique demographic, and I don't think hosted is quite there yet for the hospitality industry. What's very difficult about the hospitality industry is rooms and phones. Nobody makes any money on phones and rooms anymore, so most of those are analog devices, and integrating analog devices with a hosted platform can be very cumbersome and costly. There's some services out there that have hosted solutions that will integrate with PMS systems for the hospitality industry, but it's pretty slim right now, and XO does not have an offering as of yet from a hospitality play. From an ACD perspective, we've got multiple options from automatic call distribution, whether it's call queuing with Hosted PBX or complete call center with Hosted PBX, or our enterprise level contact center on demand product that is for very high level contact centers. All of that is hosted and integrates with our Hosted PBX product as well.
We have a comment here about bandwidth. Maybe you can respond to it, Steve. It says, you said that bandwidth doesn't matter, priority does, but that assumes you have low bandwidth. If you have higher amounts of bandwidth, you wouldn't need to prioritize. Can you speak to that?
Well, you always want to prioritize. Even if I've got plenty of bandwidth, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to use that bandwidth for some other application. Like I said, whether it's video, audio streaming, and if I don't make sure that my voice call always has bandwidth or gets the bandwidth first, I can guarantee that quality of voice. A call that's uncompressed, yeah, it takes up about 90 to 100K per call. So there's not a lot of bandwidth that's needed, but in order to be able to prioritize that traffic, that voice always gets the first grab at that bandwidth, you're going to want to have that private connectivity to do that. If I've got one phone on a broadband connection, yeah, you're probably not going to see any issues. And that's why, too, we do bring your own bandwidth solutions. We really limit that to 15 phones or less. So if you've got remote locations that are small, or you've got home users and such like that, doing bring your own bandwidth is the solution, right? Because it's not cost effective to put an MPLS connection in your house or maybe to a very small location. So it's really around that site specific and what's going on in that site and what you can live with. So if I've got one phone over a broadband connection, your quality is probably going to be more than adequate. But if I've got 50 phones or 100 phones at a location, those are all going over the public internet, there is no way to guarantee any quality of voice or to get any quality of voice for that matter.
And this is Steve. Let me just pile on in a minute too, because the factor is money. It always comes down to money. If money is no object, you could put in a 100 gig pipe for 2 people and you'd probably be fine. But I don't know a lot of businesses where money is no object. Usually you're trying to minimize costs down to the absolute bare minimum necessary to provide the quality of service you require. And so you don't want to spend lots of money for idle bandwidth that's going to be sitting there unused most of the time. And we work with people. That's part of what we do, is to work with, figure out what your business dynamics are, inbound, outbound calls, data needs. Do you have content delivery, video? Do you have, what are those needs? What does it look like? And size your bandwidth at each of your sites to accommodate those things. And as Steve was saying, prioritize the traffic on those things. And if you've got a service like ours, and there's others out there that do dynamic bandwidth allocation, as you saw in one of Steve's earlier slides, that allows you to run that circuit. Even if you're getting the minimum circuit for voice and data, you can throttle that thing so that when there is a spike or there is a lot of voice, that the data is held up and waits until there's more room and the voice throttles back down. So there's ways you can minimize that. So again, back to the caller or the person's question. It's a good question, but I don't think it's realistic in most cases, because everybody is trying to minimize costs, and bandwidth comes at a cost. And any money you spend on wasted bandwidth is money that you aren't deploying elsewhere in your business to improve efficiencies or drive down costs or get more customers, your core business.
And Steve, where that comes into play too a lot is with broadband connectivity. There's a very big difference between broadband connectivity, whether it's DSL or cable modem, even saying that it's business grade, versus dedicated connectivity that you'd get from carriers like XO. We are a carrier of dial tone and internet services. So we're a tier 1 carrier, meaning that we take you right to the internet. So any connection that you buy from us, the upload and download speeds are always the same. Where broadband connectivity, it really varies. It's a shared resource. So your upload speeds and download speeds on broadband connectivity is very different and not very conducive to VoIP solutions.
I'm going to combine the next 2 questions because I think they're sort of related, asking about desk phones with hosted BBX and soft phones. First question is, how do interoffice calls work without actual desk phones? And then the second question is, do you support soft phones for the various OSs, such as Windows, iOS, Android? So could you speak a little bit to the functionality of the hard phone versus soft phone, desk phone?
Sure, absolutely. So really a hard phone and a soft phone, no difference from interoffice communications. That application and that phone, they both have a MAC address, and that MAC address is going to be assigned to a 10-digit DID phone number. Okay, so really there's no difference. The only thing is the audio is going over your PC versus over a physical IP endpoint. So there's really no difference in that respect. I apologize. What was the other question, or the related question to that?
It was about which iOSs we support.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the soft phone we can register on a Windows machine or a Mac machine, so either or. From a smartphone perspective, iPhone and Droid iOSs are available, so nothing with Windows phones for the smartphone.
I have a question here about how hosted voice service or hosted PBX integrates with Google Apps.
There's really no direct integration with Google Apps. I mean, most of your hosted solutions, give you features like, anywhere or simultaneous ring. So if you've got a Google phone, you can sim ring to that application. But as of yet, there's really no applications integrated to Google Apps per se. There's some integration with Outlook and Internet Explorer from click-to-dial applications and so on, but really nothing around the Google front as of yet.
Okay, we have a question about hosted PBX over the Internet. More of a comment that it's subject to DDoS, whereas private connectivity is not. Can you comment on that?
Subject to what?
DDoS.
Distributed denial of service.
Okay. You want to take that, Steve?
Yeah. So anything running over the World Wide Web is a problem, and even on a private network that's even a private network has to ultimately connect to the rest of the world, unless you're in lockdown mode at the CIA or running a super secure network that doesn't go anywhere. But if you're going to be connected to the public switch network, if you're going to be connected to the Internet so that you can email other people outside your organization, you're going to be connected. And where DDoS, for those who aren't familiar with DDoS, distributed denial of service is where a hacker or an evildoer out there somewhere floods your server with inbound calls or inbound server queries to your website or whatever, and slams it so hard that it doesn't function or isn't available to your true customers who need to access your website or your contact center phone numbers or any of those kinds of things. So that's what distributed denial of service is. So you could run into that front either on the public network or on a private network. You're going to have some protections, though, on a private network that you aren't going to have on the public network. One of which, in EXO, one of the things we do offer is a hosted security product. It's a feature that runs on our MPLS network that specifically monitors and looks for anything that smells like a DDoS threat and shuts it down and protects against that. So there are ways to do it. It's a very, very good question. And that's not unique to Hosted PBX, but Hosted PBX, again, as we've said probably 20 times in the last hour, is running this on a private MPLS network with private access is going to give you your best front end against these kind of protections. And especially if you want to layer on a hosted security application, you can really do that. I'm going to jump on that 1 second longer because we were working with a customer that I was visiting down in Austin just last year, and they do healthcare products, and all of their business runs on call center stuff. All they do is fill orders in a big warehouse, and it's all inbound contact center and call center stuff. And they got hit with a DDoS attack that took them down for 3 days. And it cost them millions that they lost. And then they also spent another, I can't remember how much they were spending, but tens of thousands of dollars a month in another off-the-shelf product from another vendor to try to protect that. Once we talked to them about that and said, well, listen, we could do all of that all on the same network, and we have the feature, it's just a small feature we add to it, their eyes went wide open. Really? Where were you guys last year? So you don't want to be those guys looking backwards and saying, well, where were you last year? You want to be sitting there happy and clean saying, yeah, we're protected against that. And those are the ways you can do it is, again, private access, not public internet.
It looks like we're just about at the top of the hour. So on behalf of our presenters, Steve Lingo and Steve Jacklich, I would like to thank you for attending and thank you for the excellent questions you sent in to us. It was a lively discussion, and we would like to continue the discussion with you. You will be receiving an email from one of the Steves, so feel free to reply back to that. You will also get a link to the recording with that, and we hope to speak with you further. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you. This does conclude today's conference call. You may now disconnect. Presenters, please hold.